This podcast is for you. Your co-hosts, Ben Dodge and Eric Huso at Effect Epic Consulting, believe that your potential is limitless. Tapping into this potential is how you can affect epic results in your life, relationships, and business. Welcome to the Principles of Epic Growth.
Good morning, Ben.
Dude, I cannot wait. I know I say that a lot, but you know how excited I am about today.
And you're like levitating off your chair.
Like this. Look, guys, today we're going to talk about how the whole entire world has habits understood like wrong. Like it's just completely incorrect.
Yeah, this is going to be something that as Ben and I have been talking, it's kind of rocked my world a little bit, causing a mind shift for me. It's actually a great follow-up topic to what we talked about last week with growth mindset. This is something that can really open up possibilities to expand your growth mindset in a practical way.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, here's what we're going to lay out for you today. That every single one of us has habits, and we operate out of habits, and we behave out of habits sometimes, if not all the time.
Lots of people all the time.
Yeah, and we'll drill that down, but just know that we all have habits. Now, there's been a billion books about habits. One of the most recent New York Times bestseller is The Power of Habit, and it's by Charles Duhigg. And he breaks it down with scientific studies as to how powerful habits are and how good they are, and how you can, overcome bad habits and create good habits. And then, many people know Stephen R. Covey's work, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Habit. I mean, people have spent billions of dollars over the last few decades teaching and coaching and training corporations on habits.
And what they're trying to do is overcome some of the challenges that exist in the workplace, some of the challenges that naturally exist with human behavior. They're trying to take people from below average or even an awful state to average or good state. And what we're going to talk about today is going to blow that up in that good state is actually limiting you. It's actually limiting on what could be. It's limiting possibilities and creating kind of an infinite path of growth and an infinite path of excellence.
Yeah, so I'll put it bluntly to you. Even good habits suck. Yeah, I said that. Even good habits suck. You want to kill your potential faster than anything else, then behave out of habit. You can spend all the time in the world building the best habits for you, for your team, for your office, for your personal life. And guess what you're doing? You're killing your potential. You're operating at something less than what you could be operating on. And I don't know about you, but I don't want anything to do with that.
It's kind of an unconscious settling for mediocrity, an unconscious settling for average.
That's right.
And every habit gets its reward, whether it's a bad habit or a good habit. There's some sort of reward, and the reward of good habits is mediocrity. Like, it's good enough.
Yeah. So this book, The Power of Habit, I like how it opens because it opens up with a story about this 71-year-old guy, and I'm going to tell you his story just because it explains a little bit about the brain and what a habit is and what it does. Essentially, this 71-year-old guy lost his medial temporal lobe, in his brain. He had a little virus infection. So, his name was Eugene, but the rest of Eugene's brain really remained perfectly intact. He had no problem remembering anything that occurred prior to 1960, but he suffered from a complete and total short-term memory loss. Like he couldn't tell you that, the names of his grandkids. He couldn't tell you where his bedroom was. He couldn't tell you where his kitchen was. He couldn't, even when he's sitting in his own home, he couldn't tell you. I mean, complete, utter short-term memory loss. He's sitting right next to his kitchen, and unless he's looking at it, he can't tell you where it is in the house. But anything prior to this, virus infection in 1960, he could remember perfectly. So his wife, trying to make an effort for Eugene to get some exercise, started taking him on a walk around the block each day. And frankly, it was the same exact route, the same exact path, the same exact walk every single day. One day, she became completely frantic because he disappeared, just was gone. Now, you can imagine somebody who can't even tell you where your kitchen is, like that's a little scary.
Freaky, yeah.
71-year-old guy, he's out cruising around somewhere. He shows up 15 minutes later after having taken the walk by himself. He literally couldn't draw a map of the block or even tell you where his house was, but he began taking that same walk around the block every day. So basically what he did is he demonstrated that, kind of what scientists have expected anyways, but have never been able to prove yet, and that habits are formed and operate entirely separately from the part of the brain that is responsible for memory. Let me say it again. Habits are formed and they operate in an entirely different part of the brain, than what is responsible for memory. So later on, scientists have been able to prove this, and there's a billion articles, and you can read them all. In fact, most all of them are cited in that book, The Power of Habit. But they all confirm that you can make unconscious choices. Listen to this. You can make unconscious choices without having to remember anything about the lesson or decision-making process behind that choice. In other words, a habit. And they go on to say that a habit, really defined, is, and I've got this for you. I've got a habit defined for you. It's pretty awesome. A habit defined is essentially operating on a subconscious level, but let me get it for you directly, okay? And we'll put this in the notes later after we post this. A habit is a routine of behavior that is repeated regularly and tends to occur subconsciously. A habit is a routine of behavior that is repeated regularly and tends to occur subconsciously.
So with that definition, ask yourselves, what's wrong with habits? If you'll answer that question, then you'll have a foundation upon which we can build today that will help you expand on what you thought was a really great idea, and that's to form good habits. When in reality, what's wrong with unconscious action?
Yeah. So I'm grinning right now because it's nails on a chalkboard to me. Nothing of note, nothing of epic proportions can be achieved unconsciously. Nothing.
Yeah. So this is what when we talk about people being asleep, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are going throughout their day, they're acting, and they're unconscious as to their choices. They're unconscious as to their intention. They're unconscious to what they want to create in the world, and they just go through the motions without even thinking.
Yeah, I'll give you a really good example. Just the other day, I'm driving home on the freeway. I don't remember where I was even driving from, frankly. Again, all subconscious. I don't have to have a memory of that, right? Because out of habit, I just take this exit that I always take, and it's not where we were supposed to be going. My wife's like, "Hey, you're getting off on the wrong exit," and I'm like, "Oh shoot," out of habit, right? And how often do we do that? Literally while driving. I think most of everyone can relate to that exact example, or they could be, shaving and put it on their makeup or whatever, all while driving. And it's because driving is such a routine, repeated behavior that you can do it without really thinking about it. And how dangerous is that, right? In fact, so much so we all think we can text while we drive. We all think we can do whatever we want
Eat
to while we drive.
Shave while we drive. Yeah.
Yeah, I literally missed the exit. Or I'm sorry, I got off. Well, yeah, I missed the right exit.
The exit.
I got off on
the wrong exit.
I got off on the wrong exit. And that happens all the time. And I was acting or behaving out of habit. I wasn't awake and present enough in the moment to make a better decision. So look, I safely exited.
And 8 times out of 10, that would have been an okay decision to exit there.
Yeah, my reward for exiting out of habit there was that I wasn't in a wreck. Like I safely was able to navigate my car off the freeway and appropriately into an exit. It just was the wrong exit. It wasn't the best exit. It's not where I intended or wanted to go.
Yeah. In that particular instant, you were limited on what you could create. You acted contrary to what you were committed to.
So here's my beef with the world and the culture that surrounds habits. It's a $1 billion industry to help people develop good habits. Like and there's all kinds of studies. There's the habit loop, right? There's this, and we'll talk about it, but essentially there's a cue, and then that cue triggers a behavior that you're supposed to, repetitively do and think about, so that way it becomes habit to you. But after the cue, then there's the behavior that's triggered, at which point you get some sort of reward, negative or positive, doesn't really matter. It's your reward. And then after repeated enough times, there's different studies that say, 61 days, 30 days, whatever. After you repeat it enough time, it becomes a habit. Okay, great. I get it. Yeah, habits exist. We all have habits. In fact, we're always creating habits, either intentionally or unintentionally. We're creating habits. The problem is if you actually rely on habits to go throughout your day, your life, your business, your family, whatever, then you're operating on an average level. You're choosing to be unawake, not present. You're choosing to simply rely on a habit to carry you through something. And even if it's a good habit, all that means is that you're not operating at your full potential. So whatever money you're making at your job, if you're operating and living out of habits, it's less than what you could be doing. Whatever relationships you have with your people in your life, your family, your friends, your coworkers, if you're habitually doing things, it's less than your full potential. You can create all kinds of good habits. Like every morning you can make it a habit to write your goals down for the day. Okay, great. Those are good habits, but what if you're just not present and you're truly acting out of habit? Then whatever that is it's less than your full potential. Habits are something that we do because we're comfortable.
They create comfort, they create ease, but the downside is it results in average, it results in mediocrity. So let's take a step backwards, Ben, because as human beings, none of us are perfect, and we all have habits that get in the way that are bad habits, okay? And so what would you say to the person who's thinking right now, but what about this bad habit? I have this bad habit of eating late at night. I have this bad habit of drinking alcohol, or I have this bad habit of looking at pornography. What would you say to the person who's saying, but right now, because they've got some bad habits in their life that are limiting, and they're working on overcoming those bad habits and replacing them with good habits?
Yeah. I think there is a small, and I emphasize small, value in replacing a bad habit with a good habit. And you can study these books and you can read the research on how to create good habits. But you're still operating at less than your full potential, because if you behave on a habit, remember, if you're acting out of habit, it's subconscious. You're not. You're just doing it because it's just so repetitive. It's subconscious. You don't have to be aware of what you're doing. How can you possibly achieve something that you really want to get if you're not even aware you're doing it?
Yeah.
So replace bad habits with good habits. That's a step in the right direction.
Step,
yeah. Better. Be awake. Be intentional. And then choose intentionally in the moment, intentionally resist, and now you're not out of habit. You're just intentionally not engaging in that anymore. There's some people that go cold turkey from some of these significant addictions. I'm suggesting to the world right now that those people are not relying on good habits that they've created to replace their bad habits with. They're ultra intentional.
They've committed to something.
They're absolutely awake in that moment. And it's not easy. What I'm saying is not easy, but they're so awake in the moment that they're not going to rely on a good habit, and they're definitely not going to rely on a bad habit. They're going to choose in the moment what they're going to do for themselves. The ultimate freedom, the ultimate agency of choice is ours, and they're exercising it to something else that they want to commit to, as opposed to subconsciously and being unaware of what you're doing and hoping that is a good thing. Right? Hoping that you've built enough good habits that when you're not awake and you're not present, that you can fall back on these. Well, when you're struggling with addictions, by the way, that's not good enough. That's never good enough to just be unconsciously aware, and unaware of what you're doing. You need to be hyper aware. You need to be super intentional. And so goes it with anything else in life, business and everything else.
Yeah. So what we want to do is we want to wake up to the habits that we have. Be awake to the bad habits that are running in the background. Be awake to the good habits that are running in the background. And some of those bad habits can be totally limiting, and some of those good habits are kind of limiting, right? And so the point of this is we want to be awake. We want to be awake so that we can act with intention. If you go back to our podcast on intention, we spent an entire podcast on this one word, what intention really means. And so I recommend that you go back and listen to that podcast on intention. In a nutshell, intention is that we intend to act. We intend to do something. And so that implies conscious choice. That implies awareness of what we're doing and why we're doing it, which is, the opposite of what habit is as defined, where you're just unaware and subconsciously going through some habitual motion.
That's right. Proponents of good habits will argue that it's something you want to build, a whole bunch of good habits, so that way you can effectively devote more of your brain to, other things, right? So let's think about this. When you're driving down the road and you're driving out of habit because it's just so routine, you don't have to think about it. You can then free your brain to think about other stuff, right? Like you can think about what you're going to do at work that day, or you're thinking about whatever problem you have at home, or you're obviously multitasking with your brain. So proponents of good habits in a corporate setting especially will say, train your employees, train your corporate culture to build, a litany of good habits, so that way they can just so repetitively act out of these habits that they have, brain resources for other things. They're wrong. They're absolutely dead wrong. Your brain is the biggest, most untapped resource that you possess. To think that you can only really get into some of that brain space because you're acting out of habit is horrible. And it also assigns you to be unaware and unconscious or subconsciously making decisions. That's never a good decision-making process. If you're a captain of a boat and you're steering into a storm, do you really want to keep it on autopilot? Because what we mostly face in this life are storms. Like, there's no such thing as an easy day, really, right? We have all kinds of challenges. You can't afford to be subconsciously making decisions, even if they're routinely good ones and that you've got these excellent good habits built. Okay, great. You're still operating at less than your full potential. Wake up, grab the helm, steer that ship exactly where you need it to be adaptable to whatever's happening in your life. Like, don't rely on habits. Habits are a plan B, maybe a plan C or D, actually. Like, build them. Sure. In fact, if you're intentionally awake all the time and you're repetitively doing the right thing all the time, you're going to end up building a really good habit.
Yeah, you'll have the habit of being intentional.
Yeah, but it's still a habit. Never operate subconsciously. It's a horrible idea. So one of the books I read actually cites the military as the best example of a giant large-scale operation drilling habits into people, And they'll use sometimes like the Navy SEALs as an example as to how they operate, out of habit. And honestly, they couldn't be further from the truth. Navy SEALs don't operate out of habit. Everything they do is with such precise, thinking and intentional movements. Like a sniper, for example, it might take him 2 hours to get a drink of water because he can't be caught. And so he's intentional and precise in everything he's doing about it. They're not just because you repeatedly do something to perfection doesn't make it so that but the difference is if you're operating out of habit, you're not aware what you're doing. If you're intentional, you're aware. So repeated excellent behavior is not a habit if you're intentional about it, if you're present.
So that's a really good clarification. That statement right there, I want you to repeat it, because that's going to help people understand this that are just really wrestling right now. Because there's going to be people right now that are listening saying, man, I don't know if I believe this. I don't know if I can really swallow this. This might be over the top for me. I'm going to just settle back to my good habits. So repeat that, Ben.
Yeah, let's clarify, okay? Repeated behavior is only a habit if you're not present, if you're subconsciously making those, if you're not aware of what you're doing. Remember, Eugene, you don't have to remember anything about the decision-making process or anywhere you've been. And another good example is driving down the road and all of a sudden you realize you can't remember the last couple miles. How often has that happened to you?
Yeah.
How about putting your pants on every day? I guarantee everyone who's listening puts the pants on every day the same exact way. Left leg first, right leg first, both legs, whatever it is that you do. I'm
a both leg guy.
I'm a left leg guy. I always go left leg. But listen, you want to start challenging your brain? Change up the way you put your pants on. Start with something simple. Try it. Tomorrow morning. It'll freak you out a little bit.
Yeah. Take a different route home. Instead of going the same way every day to work, take a different route.
Yeah.
Shake things up.
Yeah. And or be intentional. Remember, repeated behavior, even if it's excellent behavior, like the Navy SEALs are going to drill until they know how to operate their gun with blindfolds, break it down into every single bolt and piece and screw and nut and put it back together again blindfolded. They are drilling repeated behavior, but the difference is they're present in those decisions. They're awake in those decisions. They're not operating subconsciously. Remember, the brain is so capable of so much. To ignorantly assume that habits are something you have to rely on so that you can devote more brain space to something else, that is just stupid. Like, you've got a giant brain. Even the dumbest person out there has a giant capacity to devote brain resources to all kinds of stuff. You don't have to go home and just unwind for hours. Like, your brain is capable of thinking all day long. In fact, I bet people will sleep better if they just use their brain all day. They won't have to go home and be restless. But seriously, be intentional. In other words, be awake and be conscious, be aware of what you're doing, and that repeated behavior is all of a sudden not a habit. Remember, habit is if you're operating basically on a subconscious level where you're unaware of something. Yeah. Don't do it. That's how you kill your potential. Yeah. Even good habits suck. Even good habits kill your potential. If you want to operate out of habits, you're choosing the average life, the mediocrity. On a financial level, let's put it to you this way. If you want to operate life out of habits, you're choosing the middle class. Good habits, I mean. Good habits. If you want to operate out of bad habits, you're bum on the street.
Poverty. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you want to intentionally build a whole bunch of good habits and rely on those to get you through life, you're choosing the middle class. From a financial perspective, okay? Like, we can use whatever analogy we want to, but from a financial perspective, it's the middle class. So don't be habitual. In fact, let's challenge you guys to this. Think about this at work. How often do you show up at work out of a habit? Park in little things. Park in the same stall, walk in the same way, do the same routine every time, and you get to your desk, first thing you do is probably open up your email out of habit. Everything you do, and then string them all together. And look at your whole day and how subconsciously, like maybe 70 or 80% of your day was a subconscious behavioral demonstration.
Yeah. And what's the impact on the business performance? So, as a business owner, if you've got all your employees that are coming to work and they're acting in a subconscious way, you're going to end up with a fast food experience, right? So you're going to end up with a McDonald's experience. And this McDonald's is still sitting here. It still looks the same as it did 3 months ago.
So Eric's referencing, look, in my office, I'm doing a McDonald's experiment. I ordered a double cheeseburger. I don't even know what they're called. Chicken nuggets and fries. Yeah. It's been 3 or 4 months now, and there's still not an ounce of mold, by the way. It's amazing. But yeah, on a business level, I see what you're saying. Absolutely.
And so, there's reward in everything. There's reward in bad habits. There's reward in good habits. And so people are exchanging those rewards for something better or something worse. So, if you have bad habits and you get that reward from that, and you keep that reward, you're saying that reward is more important to me than the reward from a good habit. But if you're like, I want to change my bad habits into good habits, well, you're going to get a different reward from the good habit. Well, now if you take it to the next level and you say, I'm going to replace good habits with clear intentional action, now you're going to get a different reward. So, and a more powerful reward. So let's go back to, the businessman, the business owner who's got all these employees, and let's just take the number that you threw out. So let's say that the majority of your employees are coming to work and they're operating 80% of the day on a subconscious level. The reward that the business owner gets is a predictable product. The person that walks into the front door, they get a predictable experience, and that's what you have in fast food. Like, you go to McDonald's, you're going to get the same burger in Arizona as you are in Tennessee. And you go to Chick-fil-A, you're going to get the same chicken sandwich as you are in Florida, as you are in Idaho.
Yeah, and maybe to a degree the same customer service even.
Yeah. And so that's the reward for the business owner, is this predictability. But that's a fast food experience. If you want a different experience, if you want fine dining, if you want something that's unique, a creation that's powerful, unique, and special, then you're going to want to eliminate that. You're going to want your employees, every time somebody walks in the door, You can want your employees to be thinking consciously, saying, what's my intention here? What do I want to create with this person? What does this person need? What can I do in this moment that will best serve this person? And that's going to create a different experience.
Yeah. So let me tell you about Starbucks. Starbucks is a something billion something dollar revenue a year thing now. I forget the exact. It's
pretty big,
like 1.2 or something $1 billion a year. A giant corporation. Their whole training program around new employees is to be intentional about building habits. They actually are intentionally creating training curriculum for new hires so they operate out of habit, which is interesting because, well, we'll come back to that. So yeah, they operate out of habit. So when you're hired at Starbucks, during the first few weeks of training, you're given this manual, this employee handbook, and it's all about habits. In fact, so much so that they drill with you and they do repeated exercises where they kind of mock up an angry customer, and you repeatedly give the responses that you created, with your handbook. The handbook has several blank pages for you to write down over and over again what it is that you're going to say when somebody might say, XYZ to you and they're angry. And you just repeatedly, drill that in so that habitually when that happens, you have your trigger, your cue, which is the angry customer. You already know your response, and so you rattle it off, and then, the reward is, of course, potentially a happy customer who had a problem resolved and an employee who continues to just work without being overly stressed. See, they did that so that their turnover wouldn't be so high. They did that so that their employees wouldn't be so frustrated and taken off guard when somebody shouts at them for their latte or whatever, right? And let's be honest, like the Starbucks menu is not easy to understand. Like it's a billion different I don't know, I'm not a coffee drinker, but it's a grande, venti, latte, double cream, 2-shot, whatever, vanilla this.
You know quite a bit about
squirt
Starbucks.
that in here, and
that secret habit, dude.
It's going to overwhelm a lot of people, right? Starbucks is going to overwhelm a lot of people, and they know this. So so they intentionally, this is amazing. They intentionally create habits in their employees from day one. They give them this employee handbook with several blank pages for them to write down the responses that feel most authentic to themselves, right? So they're not telling them canned responses, but still they're creating a canned routine. Mm-hmm. They're creating a behavior that's automatic, that's on autopilot, and literally they love it. I mean, Starbucks praises their training with their habits, and they feel like it's helped their company grow and handle and resolve concerns. I have no doubt that it's done that. I also have no doubt that they put a ceiling on their potential with their employees. Now you've got a potential angry customer who comes in, and you've got this guy who's drilled in what his responses are going to be, and he's going to say that probably no matter what. And we're not talking college grads here possibly, right? Even if they are, who cares? They're going to sit there and just rattle off their response out of their trigger cue from the angry customer. So they're in this habit loop. Out of habit, they're going to rattle off their response. It might not even resolve the customer's concern fully. It might just be something to help ease them. They might knock off the price of the coffee or give it to them for free that day. That didn't really solve anything. That guy wasn't necessarily listened to, right? So feel me what I'm saying? They are operating on a level out of habit that has definitely elevated their business to a certain degree, but it's capped. Imagine if their employees were trained to be intentional in the moment. What's your clear intention in the moment? What are you committed to, Mr. Employee? What's your clear intention with this particular customer on this issue? How might their resolution to whatever the problem is of that customer now be co-created with that customer in a way that it's such a magical experience? Not that Starbucks sucks, but they're operating at less than their potential. That's my whole point. If you want to go into a habit of anything in life, you're going to be operating at less than your full potential. And the world doesn't get that. They don't understand that.
And people that are listening to our podcast, they're not going to be the people that are satisfied with average, right?
That's right.
If you're listening to this, the name of our podcast, Principles of Epic Growth, we're not talking about principles of mediocrity here.
Yeah.
We're not talking about principles of the status quo, principles of being average. We're talking about principles of epic growth. So this is something that can help you burst through the ceiling that you've placed on yourself. Some of those fixed mindsets that we talked about last week that have just put ceilings on your potential and your possibility. Just this one little thing of changing your mindset around habit can just open up a whole world of possibilities. Now, you can see the benefit that Starbucks has from creating habits with their employees, right? You get that same experience like we talked about. But it also is clear, like Ben's just clearly stated, that it also puts a ceiling on possibilities. It prevents the employee from seeing the human being across the counter. It prevents the employee from really having a committed, intentional experience with that person who's in need. And now let's shift it into a different realm, okay? So who cares about, the people that come into the coffee shop? What about going to a doctor? What if you were to go to a doctor and the doctor was acting out of habit and he wasn't consciously with you, the human being that you are, and he just said, read a couple symptoms and out of habit, pulled out a script, wrote a prescription, and sent you off to the pharmacy.
So that happens.
No, it doesn't.
Happens all the time. Look, the extreme examples make the news. You go in for a simple procedure and all of a sudden they took your gallbladder out and they because they were acting out of habit. They got the whole wrong patient, let alone the procedure right. I mean, but on a daily level, modern medicine is one of my big pet peeves. Don't get me started with your sister, right? Yeah, your sister for sure. I mean, I love doctors and I have an ultimate respect for them. But let's be honest, if they're not present and awake, their trigger, their cue is your blood work, your symptoms that you're rattling off. That's a trigger cue for them. On autopilot almost, they just write whatever prescription they always write. Yeah, tell me you've not experienced this out there, world. Come on. And so then all of a sudden you walk away with the prescription. It kind of eases some of your symptoms. Nothing ever really totally changes, and months or years later you're going back for the same problem.
Yeah.
Look, that happens all the time. Look.
And the best doctors, and I've got a dear friend that's a doctor, and the people that love him because they experience him as being authentically engaged with them and hearing them and seeing them as a person and not just going through the motions with them. And so a shout out to all you doctors that break out of that habit and are really clear and intentional with every single patient that you're with.
Look, and that's kind of one of the keys that we're talking about is to be engaged. Like, you should never allow yourself to be unengaged unless you're sleeping. That's it. If you're sleeping at night, be fully unengaged. Yeah. Sure, that's great. Soon as you wake up, you better be engaged.
Be awake.
Wake up in the morning and stay awake. Don't culturally sleep, right? Stay awake and be awake all day. Be present. I mean, it's just be engaged. That's how you operate, out of intention as opposed to out of habit. So there's a book here. Eric's going to tell us which one this is from, but there's a book here.
It's called Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. It's a real popular book. It's a real similar premise of this, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, where it's helping people and organizations make changes in their behavior, because change management is a huge topic in the corporate world. How do we get employees to change? How do we get corporations to change? It's like trying to turn a cruise ship. It's just like this huge mass, and it's how do we get this? Listen how they're wrong, okay? I don't care how good the book is. Listen how they're wrong. This is just nails on a chalkboard to me. They're trying to help corporations change with mediocre solutions, with average way of thinking, with habits. Here they're talking about action triggers and preloading a decision. So when you're come up against something that, is difficult or whatever in your job or your work, issues that need to be resolved, they're thinking about preloading your decision. In other words, pre-decide what you're going to do so that way you can just surrender your control of the behavior in that moment to what your pre-decision was. So here's what they say. So by preloading decisions, we preserve the exhaustible resource of self-control. Terrible. You should never preserve that. You have enough self-control to last a lifetime. You should be using self-control every day. But by preloading decisions, we preserve the exhaustible resource of self-control. Again, that's wrong. It's not exhaustible. When people pre-decide, they pass the control of their behavior to the environment. Really? Do you really want to pass the control of your behavior to the environment because you pre-decided? No way. That's terrible. These action triggers protect our goals from distractions, temptations, excuses, justifications, bad habits, and competing goals. That's found on page 210, by the way, of that book. You can go read it if you want to, but I wouldn't waste my time.
Essentially,
No, I like that book. I like that book.
I'm sure you do. Essentially, essentially, they're offering a solution to a problem that you know what, good for them, but it's not the best solution. They're basically telling you that you should try and anticipate every bad thing that's going to happen and pre-decide what your response will be, so that way you can just surrender to your, you're literally out of habit. They're talking about out of habit, operating on a subconscious level of, I've already decided this is how we handle this. Okay, that's Starbucks all over again.
Yeah. I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Please.
Okay.
Let's do it.
I'm going to play devil's advocate with some certain things. Like, I've made a commitment that I'll never use drugs. I've preloaded that decision. So if you were to hand me drugs right now, like, I don't even have to think. Like, I'm not going to be like, should I or not? Like, is this case different? Like, would this be a good time to do it?
It's not
like,
the same.
Like that's not even going to be.
That's not the same.
That's not even going to be something I even consciously wrestle with, because I preloaded a decision that's something that I'll never do, because it's something that I'm committed to. Like, I'm committed to not having a drug addiction.
Exactly. That's different
Right?
than habit. It's because you have a commitment and you're clear on your commitment and you know what your clear intention is.
Yeah.
You're not unaware of what's happening in the moment. Do you see the difference?
Yeah.
Habit is subconsciously being unaware.
Yeah. Now, the negative.
So in that moment, you're very aware, and you're aware of what your commitment is, and so you can decide not to. It's not that you pre-decided not to. Sure, you decided yesterday you're not going to do that, but commitments change, right? So you're presented with an opportunity. Your commitment, because you're awake to what your commitment is, you're not operating on a habit subconscious level. You're awake to what your commitment is. You can easily say no without having to worry about it. It's not that you're not thinking about it. It's that you're so awake and so present to what your commitment is. It's an easy decision. That's different than operating on something that you've built over repeated repetition. That's a habit that tells you not to do that or to do that. See, there's the huge difference.
Yeah, and I'll play devil's advocate of my devil's advocate.
Please.
Okay.
It's a lot of double negatives.
Yeah, it's a double negative here, but the idea that we have this exhaustible resource of self-control, that's a prime example of the fixed mindset.
That's right.
How does that thought serve you? That my self-control is exhaustible.
That's right. Well,
I've got to conserve. So let's use an analogy. Okay. So we both love to cycle.
Yes.
And I recognize that, and for those of you that are cowboys, horses do the same thing. Whenever you ride a horse, when you go out, like, you're kicking the horse. Come on, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. Like, he's just dragging his feet. The moment you turn around to head back to the ranch, head back to the barn, it's like you're slowing the horse down. Like, he can't wait to get back. I found that I do a similar thing when I'm on my bike, where I conserve more energy. I'm like, I'm not going to stand it, get out of the saddle. I'm not going to really power up this hill. I'm going to conserve, because I still got this next hill, and I got that next hill, and I got this next thing. But then on the way home, like, it's all out. Like, I've got nothing to conserve. I got nothing to wait for. And so, like, I always get more PRs, faster times on the way home. And so I'm just recognizing right now, as we're talking, that, that's part of a fixed mindset of I have this exhaustible amount of energy, and that has limited some of the things that I do on a bike. And that same mindset can limit us in the choices that we make. If we have this mindset of I have a limited amount of self-control, then I'm going to be really conservative in my conscious action.
So modern thinking right now, and this is spelled out in The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg here with some of the research there, but the modern current modern thinking is that in terms of self-control, it's an exhaustible resource and you only have so much of it. That's the biggest line of BS I think I've heard in a long time. So they did study after study that proved it, by the way, in their opinion. Interesting. They'd take college kids, hungry college kids, have them skip a meal or two, and they'd sit them inside of a room with a glass window so they're watching them, and they give them instructions with this warm plate of cookies, like that they just baked, and there's a little like convection oven there. So I mean, they literally came out and they're baked and they smell good.
I can smell it right now.
Next to that plate or bowl of cookies is a plate or a bowl of radishes. And they go through this experiment where these college kids are told that they can't eat the cookies. or they're supposed to eat the cookies. Either way, they did different blind, control steps there. But essentially, what they found is that it was hard for these kids to resist the cookies. And the ones that resisted the cookies, they'd come in after 15 minutes of doing this. They'd come in and they'd have this little puzzle that they'd have to figure out. And they made it sound like it was a simple puzzle, but it was impossible to solve. And the ones that exhausted, in their opinion, their self-control with the cookies didn't have the strength, determination, fortitude, self-control anymore left over to try and finish this puzzle, which was impossible. They would just give up early, right? And they didn't know it was impossible to solve. Those that ate the cookies and indulged and were told to do that, they stuck with the puzzle a whole lot longer. So, and this study's been repeated a billion times. So essentially, those that used up all their self-control with the cookies by not eating them didn't have enough self-control to try and stick with the puzzle. And the opposite was true. The ones that did eat the cookies and were told that they can eat them, they after the cookies were removed and they had already finished their little cookie indulgence, they essentially didn't use very much self-control. Didn't have to. They were granted permission to eat the cookies. Then they spent more time trying to solve the puzzle than the other group did. Okay, that's stupid. Like, that's not even remotely real life, and I can prove it to you. Every single time you exercise self-control and get a reward for it, it's strengthened. It begets self-control, begets more self-control. Lack of self-control begets more lack of self-control.
Agreed. And we can all cite personal examples of
every
that. Yep.
single time. So the way they set this study up was just stupid. I mean, people that literally don't understand the real life problems put a bowl of cookies together and some basically math puzzle problem and thought that was going to demonstrate self. No, it's not. That's just, no one likes math. Who cares? And everyone's going to eat a cookie. It doesn't make sense. So the real life is when you exercise self-control and self-discipline and you do something difficult and challenging, your reward, part of your reward at least, is this increased strength, desire, commitment, determination to do even more.
Yeah.
It begets more of itself. Likewise, when you indulge and if you're on a diet and you cheat and you have that little something, all of a sudden you're in a downward tailspin, baby. You are indulging on everything.
Into 2 and 2 turns into 10.
You're heading to the gas station, sneaking donuts, like you're doing all kinds of stuff, right? You don't want your spouse to see, so you're eating everything when they're not in the room, yeah. So I'll just skip that part. But yeah, so listen to me, guys. This is what is so important, and this is what's so disruptive in terms of what our thought process is today, according to the world. Is I'm essentially promoting and suggesting that everyone is wrong. and I mean, I don't mean it in a condescending way at all. I'm just saying that operating out of habits and exhausting your self-control and all that stuff, that's, first of all, it's not accurate. And secondly, there's a better way.
It's okay if you want to be average.
Yeah, I
but
guess.
if you want to be epic, if you want to be a powerful creator, if you want to be an intentional individual that is creating your life, then it's not good enough. And so remember, this idea of habit. Every time you study habits, notice that they're using mice and rats. Notice that it's focused on the basal ganglia, the lizard brain in us. We're not lizards. We're not reptiles. We're not mice. We're not rats. We're human beings. And if you want to be incredible, if you want to be epic, then you have to use your conscious brain, that part of the brain that distinguishes us from every other mammal on the earth. And you actually have to be intentional. You have to give conscious thought to what am I doing and why am I doing it? What do I want to create in my world?
That's right.
So some applications here. So we all need to become awake to our habits. Like, really spend some time looking at your life. Go through minute by minute your day. Go. Just analyze yesterday. How much of yesterday did you do out of habit? Which of those habits were bad? Which of those habits were good? And then make conscious thought. What can I do today to be intentional with my time? How can I change that good habit and actually change that into an intentional action to get a more epic result?
Now remember, habits are something that is doing on a subconscious level. So don't just think of repetitive behavior that happens on a day-to-day basis for you, because if you're awake and you're present, just like the Navy SEALs are, even though it's repetitive, it's definitely not habitual.
Yep.
right? Habitual is subconscious, unaware. You're just doing it. Little example again would be putting your pants on or brushing your teeth or whatever it is that you do on a daily basis. Just identify, like Eric's saying, take the time to identify, I would say on a really micro level what some of those are, because it's easier to see, and then try and step back and look at a bigger picture of your whole day and see how much of that all was actually a habit too, where you had little blips, little moments of being present, being awake, and being intentional. But I would submit to you, I bet for most of us out there, the day goes by out of habit. Like if we're responding to an email, we might be thinking actually what, hopefully you're thinking what you should actually say intentionally in that email, and you're not just responding out of habit. But I bet even then some people are responding out of habit. But just replying to the email first thing in the morning at work, for example, is probably one of your habits. Mm-hmm. Wake up. How would you?
And the reward for that is you get some things done. You get to check off a box. Hey, I responded to that email.
Right. There's always rewards, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So listen, habits are killing you. Even good. The whole point of this is that even a good habit sucks. Even a good habit is going to limit you. So unlike modern culture is telling you, don't spend your time trying to build good habits. Spend your time being present, awake, intentional. That's far better way to live. If you've got bad habits, I feel like a lot of the materials that are out there can help you break some of those habits. There's a lot of studies and research done that can help you break bad habits and replace them with good habits. I feel like that's also just choosing average. If you've got bad habits, I'd suggest to you that a much faster and more powerful way to break them is to be present, be intentional. End of story. That's the shortcut. And it's not easy, but it's doable.
The shortcut isn't an easy cut.
Yeah, when you're faced with whatever it is in a bad habit, temptation that you've got going on, just pause, wake up, see what your clear commitment is and what your clear intention is, and make a decision accordingly. Now all of a sudden you've operated out of present awareness and mindfulness intentionally, as opposed to out of habit. And you'll start breaking habits like instantly. Yeah,
and feel free to share with us if you've put into application something that we've talked about today. Just drop us a line. Let us know how it was for you, what your experience was, what was the challenge, and what difference did it make? What difference did it make in your home life? What difference did it make at work? Let us know.
Yeah, love it. Have an incredible day, guys, and don't get sucked into habits.
Adios.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Principles of Epic Growth podcast, your path to epic performance and life with incredible growth.